colleagues. Firstly, thank you for joining this session this morning. And secondly, I want to thank Nursing Times for the invitation to speak to you today. My name's Kerry Jones and I'm joined by my colleague Charlene Pressley. And we're going to share with you today the evidence and potential opportunities for supporting different generations in the workplace. Whilst both Charlene and I have both been responsible for nursing and midwifery retention in various roles and organisations previously, today we speak to you as two passionate colleagues who've engaged extensively in the research related to nursing and midwifery retention. So we're kind of retention anoraks, really. So the research related to generational dimensions of retention is extensive. And so today we will just signpost you to this and for your further review, as well as provide suggestions on opportunities to consider these in relation to nursing and midwifery retention. So let's go back to the beginning. In 2015, I led a piece of work to begin to explore why early career nurses were leaving the profession. The resulting report, co-authored by Alison Davis and Alison Warren in Birmingham, explains through the lens of younger generations' upbringing and experiences why expectations of work and career are changing and how this might impact on job satisfaction and retention. But this, as we know, is no longer new knowledge. Since then, there's been much written about the importance of supporting the needs of a multi-generational workforce and the influence that this has on labour market trends. As such, I'm not going to go into detail of generational typologies today, even though it's a really fun session. But if you haven't read much on this, the report mentioned, which is really accessible and succinct, is readily available on the internet. So that's one dimension of understanding. So let's appraise some others. How is the makeup of the nursing workforce changing from a generational perspective? Well, this slide from a report done by the Nuffield Trust demonstrates how this makeup has changed over time. Can you see the significant increase in number of younger and older generations as a percentage of the workforce? Why is this relevant? Well, if we consider the national pattern of attrition nationally from a nursing workforce perspective, we see a consistency related to key points of vulnerability. The data show two key points of risk. The first, as most of you on the call will know, is the first 2 years after registration, and this is key. We see a significant peak in leaver rates during this early career period. And then we see lots and lots of movement and turnover up until the age of around 40. And I think this reflects what we know about Generation Y and Z and the fact that looking for a matrix of career opportunities and for employers that really align with their values and meet their needs in terms of job satisfaction. From about the age of 40 until retirement age, things then settle in terms of the leaver pattern. And of course, that brings us to our other key point of vulnerability, later career and the peri-retirement period. So let's just recap on the things that younger generations are looking for and why those needs and expectations are changing. So clear structured career development and progression pathways. So this is a non-traditional pattern, as I mentioned before, a matrix of opportunities. Care and support personally and professionally from leaders and teams. And this just basically means people want a work family, and that social component of work is really important. Feedback, guidance and developmental support. And this is because younger generations were brought up in an education system where continuous feedback was routine. And this was often for participation rather than achievement, because it enables people to know their strengths, but also build then on areas that they need to develop. So this kind of constant feedback and guidance is an expectation, I think, in the work. To be accepted, valued and appreciated, and again, education moved to a more of a team-focused problem-solving approach. So, coursework would be done in teams, assignments done in teams, and so these guys recognise the value of individuals in the team and the value of that individual contribution. Supported and enabled to meet the expectations of patients and the public. And actually that's because younger generations have a really heightened sense of social responsibility, and they want to know they're doing a really good job and contributing to the greater good of society. And of course, flexibility to achieve work-life balance. So I think I'm going to do something now that you perhaps wouldn't expect. And the reason I'm doing this is because the more research that I've engaged with and done, it's really changed, I guess, my understanding of what's important in terms of being an employer and trying to retain nurses and midwives. And I think, yes, different generations have different expectations of career and employment. And there will be needs nuanced to career stage, such as early career transition into the workforce and later career life stage needs, such as support during menopause. But I propose that we have more needs in common than we actually have that are diverse. So let's explore this a little bit further. Following publication of the Mind the Gap report, I undertook subsequent research with colleagues from Keele University. We hope to deliver a formula for how to support colleagues in each generation aligned to their specific generation's traits. Now, whilst we did identify lived experiences sensitive to age and career stage, we also identified that the root of people's experiences of job satisfaction or dissatisfaction were some core needs that were shared by all. On the right, you can see what we identified actually reflected factors consistent with, real early research on job satisfaction from the 50s and 60s, and in particular Herzberg. If you look at the needs on the left, what we identified was actually people are looking for supportive working conditions, systems of governance that weren't straitjacketing them and becoming overburdensome, and acceptable pay, status and security. But if you meet these needs, basically you just keep the dissatisfaction noise down. If you want to achieve true job satisfaction, it's the factors on the right that were key. Meaningful recognition, and this goes back to that kind of, having my contribution recognised and valued. Opportunities for growth and advancement, again, that matrix of career opportunities, and actually no matter what career stage that you're at. And then enhanced professional autonomy. And in this context, it actually means, to have a voice and influence in decisions that are made, and some flexibility in relation to how the work is done. So bringing us right up to date, I'd like to draw your attention to a recently republished National Nursing and Midwifery Retention Self-Assessment Tool and the accompanying retention guide it has. This tool is based on extensive review of the evidence. There was a global literature review on why nurses stay that was authored by Charlene alongside Professor Pam Garside at Huddersfield University, and a review of the grey literature led by Professor Jane Ball at the University of Southampton, actually about 116 papers in total. And you'll see that no matter what the research angle, one of the same 7 themes emerged. Leadership and teamwork, autonomy and shared professional decision-making, well-being, professional development and careers, pride and meaningful recognition, flexible working, and to deliver excellence in care. And this was the basis for the development of that toolkit. And can you see the thread that's coming through about some common core things that are really important to all of us? So what of these themes? I want to go back to the seminal research on job satisfaction, and in particular Hackman and Oldman's job characteristics model. This actually shows that the root of being happy in our work and performing at our best are several key characteristics. We all need to see the meaningfulness of our work, the significance of it. We need to have job control, to have flexibility and be able to influence how the work is done. We need to have the tools and resources to do the job, such as education and training. And we need to know the outcome of our contribution, that we've added value and that value's been recognised. And I think most importantly, alongside this, is we need to experience joy at work and have some fun. So consider then the organisational cultures and systems nurses and midwives work in. What level of job control and autonomy is afforded? How much do nurses, clinical nurses, participate in decision making? How much primacy do we give to education, investment and support or non-traditional career development? How much do we prioritise recognition and celebration? So I would humbly suggest that the issue is not generational at its core, but that it's the behaviours and choices individuals make when these expectations are not met, and that this may be generationally influenced. Are younger generations braver in walking away? If I have my whole career ahead of me, am I more likely to make a drastic career change decision? If I have a choice and can retire, will I choose to stay if the conditions aren't right? So finally, I would suggest, employment is a contract. And what's really interesting is patterns of employee behaviour are being witnessed across generations in the general labour market, both nationally and globally. In this report, produced by McKinsey, they identified that more than 19 million US workers and rising had left their jobs since April 2021, i.e. post-COVID. Companies across the globe are really struggling to address their retention problem. The McKinsey research has shown that creating a sense of belonging and feeling valued holds the key to strengthening ties with employees. Things have changed, haven't they? They certainly have, since I started in nursing 40 years ago. Employees of all generations are re-evaluating their priorities post-pandemic, and employers need to compete and stay ahead of the game in terms of creating cultures and workplace environments aligned to these changing needs and expectations. I would suggest that now is the time to draw on the evidence we have to transform and innovate to deliver positive workplace environments and cultures that support and enable job satisfaction and retention of today's and also tomorrow's generations. So let's now look deeper into nursing and midwifery experiences and the specific evidence base related to them in order to navigate a path forward to a better future. And to do that, I'm going to hand over to Charlene. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. I'd like to spend the next 10 minutes or so taking you through some of the research that explains the retention behaviours of different generations of nurses and offer you a window on reality through the lens of social science research theories. I will then bring the research into the context of exploring the challenge of getting from where you are now to where you want to be and proposition some theories for ourselves as nurse employers on how we can apply the evidence to support nurse retention. Lastly, I will introduce a retention framework that brings the evidence together, outlining practically how to translate the research into supporting nurses to stay. Put simply, research highlights the stark situational reality that the demand for nurses is putting demand on nurses by consequently increasing workloads and pressures. We are seeing the effects of these pressures played out in nurse retention behaviours. If we take early career nurses, for example, researchers observe how early career nurses look to find the best conditions of employment. They search out supportive teams and leaders and look to work in environments where they can best settle into and learn how to be in their new professional realities. For younger generations of nurses, the motivation to provide great care overrides organisational commitment, and where we see needs are unmet, we witness early career nurses being peripatetic and job hopping in their search of better conditions of employment. This is called maximising behaviours and is one observation of how nurses are responding to working in demanding environments. The other impacts we are seeing: increasing numbers of nurses wishing to work fewer hours and there are growing incidences of later career nurses reporting lower engagement with the meaning and importance of work, a disconnect that poses a threat to retaining the experience of our workforce. These examples describe how the rising demand for nursing is depreciating in more ways than just numbers and is affecting all generations. Let's consider a window on reality. Job pressures and clinical demands can make the work of nursing challenging. Nursing is not a job where you can go through the motions and where you can simply punch the clock. Nursing is physically and emotionally demanding. Nursing is a degree profession, and nurses are highly educated and highly skilled critical thinkers with many transferable skills, making them eminently employable outside of the profession. We must think competitively and creatively to retain. Research evidences nurses know what they want and will look to find the conditions they need from employment. In early career, nurses are propelled onto a steep individual and transitional learning experience, and their priority may be to work in an area where they feel they are supported by good leaders and mentors who can protect them from feeling overwhelmed. In mid-career, focus can change, and other elements of retention, such as career development and work-lifestyle balance, may become more of a priority. And as a nurse moves through the stages of their lives, priority may change again. Evidence describes how nurses stay working longer in areas where they feel they can manage the job demands, and when they feel their expertise is recognised and where they have strong relationships with leaders. The reality is, one job contract will not serve the whole of a nurse's career. Generations of nurses are not inherently different, but their needs and what motivates them can change. There are points of vulnerability along career timelines, and these can be managed by recognising and meeting individual terms of employment. So what does the evidence on retention say? Human capital theory determines workforce is our greatest asset, and as custodians of our workforce, we must focus on meeting their needs. Motivation theory explains how work motivates us when it challenges us to grow, and there is much experience about what factors exist in environments that germinate these conditions, such as being a learning environment, psychological safety, inclusive teams, and where autonomy and collaboration are championed. The evidence says high efforts spent and low rewards received adversely affect job satisfaction and directly contribute to intention to leave. Rewards must be equal or greater than effort. Reward, in its purest form, may be thought of as financial or meaningful recognition, but reward can be subtle, such as having great leaders or working a pattern that affords other factors of a nurse's life to be easier. Research establishes retention needs are weighted by age and career stage, and marginal gains can be made through spotlighting retention. And as a final point, in areas where engagement and morale is higher and absenteeism is lower, retention is greater. The rising demand and rising pressures on the nursing profession is worldwide. Nurse retention is a wicked global problem of which there is no magic bullet or simple, elegant solution. Acknowledging the scale of the challenge, how can we get from where we are to where we want to be? Targeting retention is propositioned as the single most effective way to stabilise the healthcare workforce, which leads to ask, what can we do to improve retention? Things we can ask ourselves as employers are we a learning organisation? Am I looking at the right problem? By this we mean, are we confident that we have the infrastructure to learn and transform? Are we open to challenging our worldviews to actively welcome and mobilise change in order to meet expectations of all generations of nurses? Historically, the Falcon of Nursing Inquiry has explored retention through the lens of why nurses leave and not why nurses stay. Nurses stay when their experience at work is positive, when well-being needs are met, when work-lifestyle balance is achieved, when they are professionally motivated to develop, and when they can give a standard of care that fits with their personal values. Nurses stay when they have agency and autonomy, working with leaders and teams they feel value and respect them, and when the meaning of what they do is recognised. Flipping thinking to target why nurses stay is solutions focused. Looking at why nurses stay is closer aligned to solving the nurse retention problem. So further questions to ask ourselves. Is my worldview aligned to the focus of the solution? Should I target or frontline investment in retention? Am I thinking bigger than my line of responsibility? Considering the evidence and recognising that retention needs differ across the span of a career, do my organisational retention plans meet the expectations of my nurses? What does my data and intelligence say? Do I know where I am carrying my risk? The evidence suggests that in taking a holistic approach to analysing the problem, the solution will be amplified. Reducing the demand for nurses will reduce the demand on nurses. So where to start? There are some great national resources, such as the NHS Retention Guide. This toolkit for managers and employers has information specifically about ways to meet the retention needs of all generations of nurses. It has material on things like flexible working, menopause, meaningful recognition, and early career. And this last slide, by way of a final takeaway, is a nurse retention framework. These are the things that the evidence says we should do to retain our nurses. Recognise individual, personal and professional needs. Empower. It is important that people close to the issues have a voice and feel they can make a difference. Trust. Psychologically safe environments and relationships are integral to nurses feeling safe and supported. Appreciate. Meaningful recognition and reward improves job fulfillment. Intervene. Commit to support and take action if needed. And finally, next steps. Think career and work with nurses to support them to visualise how they will realise their long-term career aspirations working with you as an employer. I'll close there. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back. Thank you again to Kerry and Charlene. As I said at the start, a fascinating presentation, really interesting. So as before, we've had loads of questions in. We've only got about 5 minutes, I think, but I'll try and get through as many as I can. First of all, this is a comment rather than a question. Catherine Gale says it's great to hear menopause support is important to retain nurses in the profession. I'm sure everyone would agree with that. I've got 2 questions here which I'll merge together because I think they're on the same topic, which is around career progression and equality at the top. So Stephen Singh Karkian, I hope I got the second bit of that right, Stephen, asks around percentage of board members who are from minority ethnic backgrounds, while Irene Waters asks a similar question about the ratio of female to male nurses at the top versus the general nursing population. So I'm suggesting that the question is really, it's around career progression. If nurses see the lack of equality at the top, does that have an impact on retention? And I guess, how do we change that?
Yes, so I think that the simple answer is yes, there's more to do. I think as part of people's retention plans, it's really important now to give focus to inclusive talent management. And what that actually means is, not waiting to certain points in a person's career before you start developing them for leadership roles. So it starts, right from students, and looking at that, what talent have we got there, and how can we track that through different career pathways. But equally, how do we ensure that all our opportunities are as inclusive as possible? And for those that we know are less likely to be in senior positions, how do we make that a lot easier? So I think, yes, absolutely part of retention, but yes, we all know we've got more to do.
Great, thank you very much. And Claire Tranter, I think this is an interesting one. So Claire wants to know whether you've seen any, well, she says, do you find certain generations of nurses gravitate towards certain areas of nursing? So she works, so she says she works in an area that has traditionally been seen as an older nurse's job, in quotes there. However, there are exciting opportunities in what she does. So I should have said she's from NHS Blood and Transplant. So she said there are exciting opportunities in blood donation and things like that. So how do you change the thought process, I suppose, in terms of generations and different parts of nursing? As primary care and practice nursing might be another example of that, perhaps.
Yeah, and again, I think that comes back to exposure, doesn't it? Because you don't know what you don't know. So how do we early on, particularly for students, and then in the early career period, expose people to as many opportunities as possible? So that could be set fields, it could be sectors, it could be, a variety of different pathways that we have. So this goes back to this notion of a matrix of career opportunities. So, and making that as visible as possible. So I don't think it's necessarily, or I haven't seen anything to suggest that it's a generationally influenced where people choose to work. I think for me, it's the kind of lack of exposure, and the kind of way we present careers in a very traditional way, rather than a way that will meet the needs of the future workforce.
Great, thanks, Kerry. We're into our last minute. Do you want to give me a very, very succinct take-home message from your session?
Yeah, so I think we know now the important things for retaining nurses. But actually, if we're really going to get traction, we have to recognise that these interventions are about true culture change. You can't tick box having policies or things, you have to live it. And so I would say the win for people would be meaningful recognition, go along, meaningful celebration, because to know your values is critical. Find ways to enable nurses to influence decision making. So shared professional decision making is a really great way of doing that, because it does absolutely give voice to nurses at all stages in their career. And finally, let's think differently about careers.
Fantastic, thank you. We'll have to leave it there. As I said, we're out of time, so thank you to Kerry and Charlene. Next up is something close to my heart, a presentation on the value of good preceptorship. And I'm delighted to introduce Professor Gemma Stacey and Jessica Sainsbury, who are both from the Florence Nightingale Foundation.